This format's a mess, so I'm gonna fix it. Hey guys, Otaka here, back with another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video. So the August Forbidden Limited list, which is confirmed to be at the end of August, is soon to be upon us. We just recently had the NAWCQ, we just actually had the EUWCQ, and for the most part, Fiendsmith Snake Eye is overtaking the format. But there are some cards in this format that are problematic, to say the least, and not just on the Snake Eye end of the spectrum. And there's also, of course, some cards on the list that could probably come back that aren't really doing a whole lot. But before we do jump into the list, I do want to, of course, remind you all that if you are not subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing if you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content and leaving a like on this video and possibly hitting that bell button for future notifications of when I upload my videos so that we can continue to support the channel and I can continue to make videos like this one. So this is pretty plain and simple. Anything in this bracket is banned, anything here is limited, anything here is semi-limited, anything here is at 3. First card I want to talk about is something that a lot of people have been talking about in the last little while, and that is Spooky Dogwood. So the reason people are complaining about Spooky Dogwood is that it pretty much just gains you a bajillion life points on activation because your opponent keeps playing into it, and some people have been kind of comparing it to Max C because it just wins games. And I'm just kind of like, shut the fuck up. Spooky Dogwood is only a good time card, 1, because of the current format, and 2, because of the current time rules. Now, I am not of the firm belief that the old time rules were better. I do think the concept was a little bit better. It's just how we as players executed it was very poor and very abused. But the current time rules are not that great either. The current time rules have created this whole bracket of cards that are pretty much terrible, but they're only good because they are known as time cards. For those who don't know the time rules, when time is called, pretty much when the current phase in the current game ends, whoever has the most life points wins that duel. And it's because of this that we have had plenty of cards be seeing play that either burn your opponent or gain you life points. That's why the Fiendsmith Lacrimosa is as good as it is. I mean, the card's still very powerful, but it also has an inherent burn effect that can just win games. But we are also in a format where, unless you're playing Yubel specifically, every card has some sort of attack points, so Spooky Dogwood is going to be taking advantage of that. So we are, again, in a format where a card is taking advantage of the fact that your opponent is comboing off and special summoning 1,000 times, and so a lot of people are like, oh, this is like Max C, because it's either you play into it and give your opponent the game, or you don't play into it, so they can still steal the game. I disagree with this. I think if you're going to get hit with Spooky Dogwood in game 3, you should already be kind of prepared that your opponent is going to be siding this. This card is a card that is on everyone's radar at the moment, so you should kind of be expecting this to be thrown down, and because of that, you should be kind of playing around it, or think of lines that set up good boards without giving a bajillion life points. But also, at the end of the day, maybe you should be getting hit with Spooky Dogwood because maybe you were the one slow playing. So because of that, I think Spooky Dogwood needs to stay at 3. I don't think this card is a problem. I think what's facilitating this card to be a very good card at the moment is what's actually the problem, which is the current time rules and the current format. Now, that being said, I don't particularly know how we would enforce new time rules. I like how in the old time rules it was like 3 turns and then the duel ends after time is called, but they also can probably try to execute in a way that that can't be abused, because I remember that back in the day that used to get abused a lot, so that way the duel would never truly end. Next, I want to talk about Summon Sorceress. I think this needs to come to 1 because the OCG has the errata. We technically don't yet. I'm assuming that the errata is going to come in the tins because last year's tins had a bunch of cards that had their text kind of fixed and all that, like Shark Drake Vice I think was in the tins last year. So I think any of the erratas, like even Plushfire, is going to come into our tins, so that way they're incorporated in the TCG. So putting this to 1 with the errata in effect, I think that's fine. This isn't like a super defining card by any means. This is just like, this needs to happen at this point. It got errated. Now let's talk about the true problematic cards of the format. High Wave King Caesar and Beatrice. Both these cards are facilitated by the Fiendsmith engine, and their problems. Beatrice, of course, being the main one. Beatrice needs to fucking go. Beatrice needs to be absolutely butchered, and there's no way in hell she doesn't get banned. The Fiendsmith engine makes Beatrice incredibly easy, and because of this, this is how they're, for the most part, burning you whenever they feel like burning you, because they'll just detach Lacrimosa at their own convenience or link away the Beatrice. But on top of that, there are, of course, like combos like Angel Blue Tears, or Beatrice is helping you set up your actual combo, like in Snake Eyes, she can dump Ash, and then you can link her away for Promethean, and Promethean revive the Ash without committing an actual normal summon. For the most part, Beatrice needs to go. She's at 1 currently, but she needs to go. go. Caesar, I'm kind of in the boat that I'm tired of this card. Unchained play this card. This card was fucking annoying. This card is fucking annoying now. I'm ready for Caesar just to be kind of banned. I don't think it's going to get banned. Caesar, for the most part, is like a wish list thing, not a prediction thing. But I'm ready for him to go. That being said, I know that most decks that are running the Fiendsmith engine are not running Caesar. But if Beatrice goes, Caesar might be the next best option, just so that way you have a higher defensive board. But I don't think we need Caesar in this format. Pot of Prosperity, this card is for the most part not a card that anyone's really been talking about for the longest time. I'm still in the boat that this card needs to be put to 1. I think this card does way too much, and if Snake Eye gets Butcher, we're going to be running into a lot of decks that maybe need Pot of Prosperity, and Pot of Prosperity, especially on turn 1, can steal games. Tenpai runs this card right now because they have a lot of non-engine in the deck, so if they don't see engine, they're hoping Prosperity will find it. And I just think that Pot of Prosperity in Tenpai especially can steal games by finding the one missing piece that they maybe need. I think hitting this card to 1 is very fair. That way it can still be played, and it's still a somewhat fair card. You are giving up a chunk of your extra deck, but it lets you look at the top 6 cards at most of your deck, and that can be very powerful. Calamity, I think we're all in the boat. Calamity's got to go. Centurion is very consistently making this card. Centurion, for the most part, is not that much of a threat of a deck, except for the fact that they make Calamity. And my thing is they're probably not going to ban the Crimson Dragon, which is what summons the Calamity, because he's in the tins. And since we're not banning the Crimson Dragon, which is, in my opinion, the actual problem, not Calamity itself, we need to ban Calamity. Centurion is getting to a point, they're getting new support in Rage of the Abyss as well, and that support's actually really good. Centurion is just getting to a point that they don't really need Calamity. They can set up very powerful end boards now without Calamity. It's just Calamity, just like Branded with the Gimmick Puppet, which we'll talk a little bit later, is just kind of a win more strategy at this point and just kind of wins the game. It's an auto FTK essentially. Next, we're going to talk about Gimmick Puppet of Dark Strings. We're going to put this to 1. I don't think this is going to happen, and this really isn't a wish list thing. This is more of something that I think needs to happen. FTK strategies in general are not a fun strategy, unless of course you're the one playing it. But Gimmick Puppet FTK, hitting the Gimmick Puppet of Dark Strings doesn't ultimately remove the FTK. It just makes it a lot more difficult because the deck plays anywhere from 2 to 3 giving the player. But I think putting this to 1 makes it a little bit more difficult. But I think this card just kind of needs to go to 1. I don't think banning it's necessary. And it's one of the older cards, so we can't necessarily justify like, oh, well, the Gimmick Puppets just got new support. And okay, well, we're not hitting the support, we're hitting one of the older cards. Now, I, of course, am saying this being someone who has played the Gimmick Puppet FTK, and I do acknowledge how frail the deck is, so if this doesn't happen, I can completely understand why it doesn't happen. The deck auto loses a shifter. It cannot perform the FTK under Droll and Lockbird. And it does, unless you have the field spell, does kind of die to too much interruption. So again, I don't think this is going to happen. I think it probably should happen, but I understand if it doesn't happen. Flameberge, fuck this card. I don't think this is going to happen. This is my problem here. I don't think Flameberge is going to get banned, especially right before Worlds, because Flameberge is what makes Snake Eye be Snake Eye. Flameberge, in a sense, is 3 bodies on its own, which can facilitate anywhere from like Link 2s, Link 3s, and even Link 4s, or a bunch of Xyz engines, and blah, 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 blah. I don't think Flameberge is going to get banned, but holy fuck does he need to. Not to mention, Flameberge just does too much. He can put shit in your opponent's back row. He can summon anything from the back row to your field. He can put anything in the graveyard to the back row. And of course, this is what makes IP as good as it is. IP is still good because, of course, it gives SP Little Knight kind of more of its on-summon effect, but this card does too much. And I think any card that does too much needs to go. Again, I don't think this is going to happen, but I'm really hoping it does. This is, again, another wish list thing. I'm sick of Flameberge, Flame Barf, as some of my friends call them. We're done with this card. This card has got to go. Opening the Spirit Gates, this is a card that really only Yubel is playing currently. This card's really good, but it's kind of a lot. If you get drolled on this Dark Beckoning Beast, I think is what it is, then this card is pretty much dead, and Yubel as a whole cannot really play as much. But this card is just a lot. I think putting it to 1 is necessary. I think they run it at 2, maybe 3, because it is just a 1-card starter for Yubel specifically. And for that reason, I think we just need to put it to 1. Yubel, for the most part, is primarily new cards, so we can't really hit any of that stuff because it all just did come out in Phantom Nightmare, which is 2 sets old at this point. But I don't think we're hitting any of the Yubel stuff, except maybe the actual Yubels, but at most you're playing 2 of the regular Yubel and 1 of Terror Incarnate. We can't really hit any of that stuff. So because of that, we kind of have to hit the next best card in the deck, which is going to be the opening of the Spirit Gates. The problem here is that if we hit Snake Eyes too hard, Yubel becomes most likely the best deck in the room, and by a large margin, might I add. So we kind of have to hit the card that kind of starts it all if they open it. Next is Skill Drain. Put it to 1. Put it to 1. In my personal opinion, ban this fucking card, but put it to 1. Every Floodgate, for the most part, minus Summon Limit, is put to 1. Skill Drain can be played in a lot of different strategies right now. Snake Eyes, if they already set up a strong board, can just flip this whenever they feel like it, but also they can out it themselves, just like they could with Summon Limit. Because they can send the Skill Drain to the graveyard for cost, this card is just, again, a problem. All Floodgates are a problem in Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes is abusing all of them. But White Woods can also play this card because, again, they can send it to the graveyard for cost when they feel like outing it. So, again, I think Skill Drain needs to get banned, but if I was a betting man, this card would probably get put to 1 because for some reason Konami thinks this card is fair, flipping it and shutting off the board for your opponent. I was playing it in the Gimmick Puppet FTK in my last video I was talking about, because if you already set up a very powerful board of like 3k beaters, Skill Drain's just gonna win you the game. This card's just a problem, in my opinion. Sengen Summoning, the field spell for Tenpai. I think we should put it to 1. I think the OCG is kind of onto something, putting this card to 1. Sengen Summoning just kind of does a lot. It not only makes your fire dragons immune to everything during the main phase, but it also starts you, essentially. The only thing that can really out this card from starting in a whole Tenpai combo is Ash Blossom of Joyous Spring, which I wouldn't recommend ashing this. I would rather save it for the Sengen Kaiman, if possible, or the Pydra, but the other card that can out this is Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, which we are not really running anymore. But I think this card is just, for the most part, problematic because this card can protect you in the main phase, and a good Tenpai pilot is making the level 10 synchro, so that way they are safe in the battle phase. So for the main phase and the battle phase, because of this card, they are for the most part safe from all card effects. That being said, I do acknowledge that this card is for the most part needed in Tenpai. It's not like needed, but it does help them play the game and be a turn 2 OTK deck. You do kind of need that protection in the main phase when we have all these negates in the game now. But for the most part, I think putting it to 1 limits the deck in the sense that they can't just auto win because they saw one in hand or they milled it off Prosperity super easily. Next is Frame Gear Gamma. Bring my boy back to 3. This card did nothing wrong. You want to know what this card did wrong? The only thing this card did wrong was that it was the counter to Droll and Lockbird, which Droll and Lockbird was the counter to a super oppressive deck of super heavy Samurai. And wouldn't you know it, we are in a super heavy Droll and Lockbird format again. So because of that, we might not see Gamma come back, but this card needs to come back. Gamma is a perfectly fine card. It's annoying, but I think it's perfectly fine that this card, because it's balanced. You cannot control any cards when you activate this card. So if you're going first, I mean, it somewhat protects you, because if you activate a monster effect in hand and then they ash you or something, and then you can go Gamma to protect yourself, sure, fine, but the moment you summon a monster, you can't activate this card. Next, let's talk about Gimmick Puppet versus Sanctifier. So as you can see here, I don't have Sanctifier on this list, and that's because I don't think Sanctifier needs to go. I think Gimmick Puppet Nightmare needs to go. Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, I've talked about this 1,000 times. I am on the boat that Gimmick Puppet needs to get banned, not Sanctifier. Gimmick Puppet Nightmare is the problematic Floodgate compared to all of the other ones. All of the other ones can be outed. You can tribute over them. You can somehow Book of Moon them or Book of Eclipse them. You can send them for cost off of Droplet and stuff like that. Whereas Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, if you do that, you're still locked out of the game. It's a lingering effect. So I think Gimmick Puppet Nightmare is the problem because, yes, branded players, if this thing gets banned, we're going to just use Sanctifier to summon one of the other ones. But the next best one, the only other lingering one, is DD Orthos. And once you know it, he locks you into Fiends for the rest of the turn. Does that sound problematic in our current format? No, not really. So we're probably going to see like Raw's Disciple get thrown back into the deck. Because Raw's Disciple, yes, still locks you out as long as it's face up on the field. But also at the same time, Branded is not one of the most best decks in the room. It is seeing a lot of play in the current format because of Gimmick Puppet Nightmare specifically. Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, if a Branded player goes first, can just tell Snake Eyes, no, you can't play the game. And the only thing that adds to that is Branded is very good at breaking boards. So that way we can still kind of break a Snake Eyes fully established board and then turn around and once again Gimmick Puppet them if we can't finish them to kind of lock them from the crackback. I think Gimmick Puppet Nightmare is the main problem. The Albion Sanctifier Dragon is just kind of letting Brandon do what it does and summon Albaz to your field and a monster to your opponent's field so you can fusion summon and blah, 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 blah. Is it being used for that? No. But I still think Gimmick Puppet is the problem card. You're free to argue with me in the comments. I'll argue back. It's fine. Heavy Storm, bring it to 1. Literally, Master Duel has it to 1. The OCG has it to 1. There's no way this card doesn't come back to 1 in the TCG. This card's really good. Now, I understand that the problem here is that you could justify that this is really bad because it will nuke your back row, which could be beneficial to you. I don't think it's going to get used for that. It's just going to be a second Harpy's Feather Duster, essentially. But I can see the problem with this card. I don't think it's going to be as big of a problem as everyone thinks it is. This card has been kind of power crept. I don't think it's a big deal. Bring it back to 1. OSS. Ban OSS. OSS does not necessarily shut Snake Eyes off. My problem is I don't think we're going to be hitting Snake Eye Ash because Snake Eye Ash has an ulti now, and it's still in the current OTS pack. That being said, I could see us banning Oak. Oak is actually a big problem, and I didn't put Oak on here. I think Oak needs to be in the ban slot as well, and I think Oak is more likely than flameberge. But I think banning OSS and Oak is very good because banning OSS not only cuts the deck off from utilizing any level 1 fire in the game, but also it just kind of prevents the deck from getting its draw power off of Wanted with OSS getting put back into the deck. And then also banning Oak, if you activate Shift or something, Oak can help you play around that. Oak is also just a second Snake Eye Ash. It can summon out the Flameberge or any Snake Eye monster you're missing. Which I think both Snake Eye Ash and Oak having that effect in general is really fucking stupid, but to each their own, I guess. But I think banning Oak, so that way banishing cards with like DD Crow is actually more viable of a strategy, is really good. Banning Oak, so that way they don't have the second Snake Eye Ash effect, essentially. So that way, if you Ash the Snake Eye Ash, they can't just summon Oak, and then Oak does the same fucking thing to get the Flameberge out, and they kind of recover from that. I think banning Oak and OSS is actually still pretty impactful, but we do need to see some Snake Eye hits for this format, some bans, because the deck is doing too much, and I think limiting stuff is not going to be enough. Protos can go back. Put Protos back. Protos, we saw at, I believe, the NAWCQ and even the EUWCQ. Protos just does a lot. There are a lot of mono attribute type decks, and Protos can just abuse that by just calling the attribute, and then your opponent can't play the game, and it's a lingering effect. So, you know, there's that. I think Protos is just a problem card, and any deck that can utilize it with like Nemesis Flag, it's super easy to get out in so many decks. Like Ritual Beast can utilize this card by making the Flame Banshee get the Nemesis Flag, put one of the many banished materials back in the deck, and then sure enough, you got yourself a Protos. So again, we're going to talk about Gimmick Puppets here. Again, I don't think the deck is going to get hit this soon because FTK strategies are not a fun thing to play against. But again, I could foresee it not happening because the deck is as frail as it is. But if you really want to just shut off the whole FTK strategy in general, ban the Argent Chaos Force. This card's been banned once already, but ban this card again. The deck runs 2. The deck can recycle it 3 times if you only see the 1, because you can search it off the Machinix, activate it, then you summon out another rank 8 and you can add it back to hand, activate it, rank up, and then you summon out another rank 8. And then, sure enough, Machinix can put it back in your hand, and you can activate it again. This card has a lot of recyclability. This card is the main reason the Gimmick Puppet FTK can happen. And the Machinix searches any rank-up magic. So it's not like banning this card just shuts off Machinix's effect. I think we should just... If you really don't want the FTK strategy to exist, strings to 1 might not be the route, but Argent Chaos Force getting banned entirely is certainly the route. I don't really need to talk about Shifter that much. Shifter needs to get banned. I hate this card. If you come into the comments and tell me Shifter balances the format, it shuts those combo decks off, it keeps them in check, blah, 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 blah. Shut the fuck up. I play so many decks that are not combo heavy that just die to Shifter. Because this card is just a problem. If it only lasted the turn it was activated, sure, fine. But it lasts 2 whole turns. it lingers, and the only 2 outs is Called By and Crossout Designator if you are running Shifter, which if you're playing a deck that dies a Shifter, why the fuck would you be running it? No, I hate Shifter. I will die on the hill that Shifter needs to get banned long before anyone convinces me that he is fine for the format. Shifter has been super relevant since essentially the day it came out. It's been getting played in Flu since day one. It was played in Kashtira. It's been played in Ritual Beast. It's arguably the best deck to run Shifter. It's been played in Vanquish Soul. So many decks that play this aren't even like the best decks in the room, minus Kashtira specifically. This card is a problem. And I also think that any deck that can benefit from Shifter, that's also not okay. I think just like Fluandrees, Kashtira, and Ritual Beast, super chill with Shifter. Vanquish Soul, they didn't particularly want to play into it, but they could play around it. Then, of course, we have decks like Branded that play it in the side sometimes. They don't particularly like playing into it, but again, they can play around it. Shifter in of itself can be an FTK, because if you just can't play under Shifter, you just lose the game. And I don't like the argument of, oh, play around Shifter, or don't play this deck when Shifter's good in the format. Shifter's good in every fucking format, because every deck uses the graveyard these days, for the most part. Runic Tip, I think, should go to 1. Runic is really good in the format still because of Runic Stun, but also White Forest or White Woods Runic is actually a really good strategy. And once again, Runic Tip, I've said this before, I love Runic. I think it's a really fun archetype, but I think Runic Tip just does way too much. It has, the usual effect of every Runic spell where it can summon, but it can search any Runic card from the deck, and then it still hits one off the top of your opponent's deck. So if you're going first, it could give you not only knowledge of what you're playing against, but also it just lets you adapt, essentially, because if you have it on your opponent's turn and you have Fountain on board, you can activate it to search the card that's going to let you break your opponent's board before it gets established. I think Tip just does too much. I think banning it's not necessary, but maybe put it to 1. Windup zenmains. I've been seeing this a lot. I don't think this card's all that great right now. So put it to 1. It's still on the ban list. I think it's been on the ban list way longer than it needs to be. I also may be saying this because I have 12 ulti rares just sitting in a binder waiting for this card to come off the list. But, who knows? But I think Windup zenmains should come off the list. I don't think he's going to facilitate anything super crazy coming off the list, especially at 1. So just bring him back. Call by the Grave, put it to 2. If we're going to keep Shifter, if we're going to be staying in a format that has 21 hand traps or more, bring Called By to 2. Many people could argue, oh, Called By is just as bad as Shifter because it's a lingering effect that lasts to the end of your opponent's turn. But my thing here is that most likely you are activating this on your turn when you go first to negate the hand trap that hits you, meaning that your opponent just can't ash you on their turn, which, I mean, I guess, that comes up sometimes. But Called By, I think, is just way too needed for the stipulations that we are under currently. Shifter is a very good card, probably the best hand trap in the game currently. The Tenpai is running him. Ritual Beast is running him. Flu still exists. And then we have 18 to 21 hand traps in the format on the regular. So just hit those cards too. I don't think Called By needs to come to 3. I think it is still an incredibly powerful card that could be problematic at 3, but I think 2 is fair, right? But that's really all I have for my ban list prediction. Like I said, there are a couple of wish list things on here. I think flameberge is a wish list thing. I think he probably won't get hit. Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, this is up in the air between him and Sanctifier. I think Gimmick Puppet Nightmare should go, not Sanctifier. Shifter won't get hit, and he's dodged 40 lists at this point. I wish he would get hit, but there are a couple wish list things on here, I won't lie, but for the most part, I think a lot of this is pretty explainable and pretty reasonable, and, probably a good prediction at the least. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I, of course, want to hear your thoughts on maybe these cards I have in here. Snake Eye Oak, I forgot the image, but I would put it in the band. But other than that, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to make more videos like this one, and I will see you all in the next video. See ya!